Welcome to Heal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Hey guys, before we jump back into the podcast, I want to say thank you for listening. But I noticed that you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet. Go to Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube or just scan the QR code in the corner where you'll be able to find multiple podcasts that we have with over 300 episodes that's uploaded right now for your enjoyment. So do that really quickly. Now, get back to the podcast. All right. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Earnest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. Therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on all of your podcast listening platforms, as well as checking us out on our YouTube channel, which is the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. Again, that's the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube, where you will find the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, where I talk to other girl dads like myself, and sometimes even daughters about the relationship between the dad and daughters in order to combat the narrative of the absent father and the absent daughter. The absent father and the fatherless daughter. So that's what we talk about on that podcast. You also will find the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, which you are listening to or watching right now. So again, that's the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, which both can be found on the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube. So make sure you guys go to the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's also some other podcasts on there as well, and more to come. So make sure you guys subscribe to our podcast. But today, just like any other day, we are blessed with a guest. Philly, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. You know, if I can, I don't know if I told you this, because I know we chatted a little bit before the show, but my boss came up to me the other day and he was like, dress for the job that you want, not for the job that you have. So the next day I showed up as Spider-Man, but he kind of wasn't too impressed.
Right. But hey, that's the job you want, right? So, Billy, first of all, let me say thank you so very much for being on. I definitely appreciate you being here with me and my guests, because you could have been doing anything else with anyone else, but you're here with us, and we definitely appreciate it. So I want to say thank you. So we're going to jump right into this thing. Do me a favor, introduce yourself to my audience. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Well, besides loving dad jokes, which I just shared with you, I am a father of 3 daughters, somebody who has a lot of life experience, and with all that life experience, saw how the world was acting, behaving, and how we were communicating with each other. And I developed an organization called the Common Ground Project USA. And I've seen how we interact with each other. As soon as somebody disagrees with us, as soon as somebody doesn't see eye to eye with us, we cut them off of our lives. We bully them. We, stop talking to them. Eventually, we disassociate from them. You hear of families who can't have family dinners anymore because somebody voted for somebody. And I created this organization where I wanted to bring humanity and unity back. And so with that, it is we have three pillars in which we attempt to bring humanity and unity back. And that is through personal stories, personal talents, and community. And we want to let people know that A, we have more in common than we disagree with. And when we focus on the things that we have in common instead of the stuff that we disagree with, I believe we can be a much happier place. But when we talk, so the personal stories, we have our own podcast, the Common Ground podcast, where we really go into personal stories. Personal talents is showcasing people who have talents, like podcasters, musicians, all types of different people. And community is where, like, we'll talk about mentorship. We'll talk about learning some of the skills that schools you thought should have taught us and don't know how to, like how to do your taxes, how to do a budget, how to do various things. So um that's what I'm all about. That's what I'm all for, is really bringing unity between all of us. And I first just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to be here. uh, I know that I really enjoyed the opportunity that you had to come on our podcast, and I just thank you for allowing me to come and share with your audience.
No doubt, no doubt, and I definitely appreciate it as well, for you having me on the Common Ground podcast. Great episode. I really enjoyed it. To my audience, make sure you guys go and check that out. Right. But I want to go back. Well, first, before I go back into your history, one of the things you just said, you are our father of three daughters. And so we do have the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, which was a spinoff from this podcast, because whenever I will have another girl dad on, I will ask a couple questions. So I'm actually those same questions. So what does it mean for you to be a girl dad, and what is something that your daughters have taught you?
Patience, tons of patience.
Mhm.
It's funny because earlier on in my life, people are like, "Oh, how many?" Like they always ask you, like, "How many kids do you want?" I want three boys. And God was up there and he was laughing. He was like, "If you don't believe that God has a sense of humor, God has a sense of humor," because he heard those words go out of my mouth, and he's like, "I'm giving you three daughters." And and I know the way that God works, because God says, "You know what? Three boys will be easy for you." But easy isn't what you need. You need to
Mhm.
be stretched. You need to learn. You need to suffer. You need to learn a lot of humility and everything else. And so he blessed me with three daughters who, it's just the biggest privilege to be a girl dad. And if I could go back to that boy who said three boys, I'd say change your answer. I would desire to be a girl dad.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And one of the things that I always talk about on the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, when having these discussions with some of the dads who were like, "Oh, I wanted to have a son," and I always say that I think that you know when God hears us and we say, a lot of times we say we want sons. I think that there's a part of him that says, "I'm going to give you a daughter because I want you to change, right? I want you to become a different person." And just knowing guys who grew up with having sons, it's like that little mini me, and you take them to all the places you go and everything that you do. You teach them to be just like you. But when God looks at you and say, "There's some things about you I want you to change, so I'm gonna give you a daughter," because as a father, some of the places you go, you wouldn't take your daughter to. You know what I mean? So some of the places you go, some of the things you used to do, some of the people you interact with, you're like, "No, I'm not taking my daughter there." And so when you start changing because of your daughter, then you start becoming the person that God wants you to be all the time. But had he given you a son, then you would just pull your son right into the same, into the same situations. So I always say that sometimes God gives us daughters because he wants us to change into a different version of ourselves. And so, yeah.
100%. 100%. Totally agree with you.
Good, good, good. So, Philly, I want to call you John. I might call you John sometimes.
Either one works.
So let's go back into your background, right? Because before you started the Common Ground podcast. Well, let's just go all the way back. Growing up, who was John growing up? What were you like as a young kid, teenager, and that brought you up to becoming the man that you are now?
I was a kid who loved being outside. Like, I don't get these kids who don't want to be outside. Like, if you asked me years ago, if you told me I had to spend a day inside, I would have been like, no way. You couldn't pay me enough money to spend a day inside. But I always felt like I saw the world differently. I experienced the world differently. Grew up in the church. At the age of 13, and this is why I'm saying, like, I see the world differently, entrepreneur. At the age of 13, I went to my father, who was running our youth group, and I was like, I think we should do a camping trip, a camping retreat. And he's like, you plan it. So at the age of 13, I planned a full camping trip, and I'm talking like, I did registration forms. I got the campsite. I got the food. I got a schedule together. I provided transportation for everybody. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I just picked out a site and my dad did the rest of the work. I did every act. Like, I organized going and buying the food and having the food there. Like, I took at the age of 13. It was one of my most proudest things, that a 13-year-old could pull this off. For 10 years, that annual camping trip it started as a youth retreat, youth camping trip, to a men's youth camping retreat, to a church camping retreat, to a church retreat. And like, it grew every year and got bigger. And it was the major event of our church. Like, everybody wanted to be a part of it. And it was started by a 13-year-old and somebody who just wanted to go camping. The other thing I didn't realize until later on in life, when I was a deacon at one of the last churches I was at, was I used to go, and I remembered going and standing on the steps in front of a vacuum pretending to preach. And years later, I would be preaching sermons. So faith has always guided me. I went to a biblical college to be a youth pastor. Ended up not going that way, got married. Life took me in a different direction. But every skill that I learned, every job that I had, taught me something new to lead me to this point. And I feel like everything led me to building this organization, and building this podcast and everything else that I'm doing right now.
Yeah. And I always say, purpose leaves clues. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that once we find our purpose, if we look back over some of the things that happen in our lives, we can see the little breadcrumbs that led us to where we are. I think sometimes people think that, like, you just find your purpose, out of the blue, or something happens, you're like, oh, this is my purpose. But if you're able to really walk into your purpose and you begin to look back, you'll see that there was little signs along the way that kind of led you, to there. So I want to ask you, because you grew up in the church and your father. So were you a pastor's kid or a preacher's kid?
No, my dad eventually did become an elder of the church, and he was very involved in the church. He was involved in church leadership, but he wasn't the pastor.
Okay, cool. So part of my story, the reason why I asked that, because I am definitely a part of
PK.
Right, I'm a PK, pastor's kid, preacher's kid, generations of pastors and preachers in my family. So I remember, sort of like yourself, having those dreams of standing up in front of people. And when I was younger, when I started having those dreams at a young age, I didn't see myself as a preacher. I see myself as a speaker. So when I would have those dreams, I would think, oh, because I had on a suit, and in my visions, I had on a suit. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be a businessman, and I'm going to be leading, organizations or whatever, and speaking to but I didn't see myself as a preacher, even though that was the family that I grew up in, I didn't see that happening, you know. But I do remember my first time speaking, and I want to see if you can remember your first time ever speaking, but I'm sure it was be different than how mine was. So we, again, growing up in church, we had a youth day, and on our youth Sunday, which we had once a month, the youth would lead in all categories. So the speaker was a youth, the ushers were youth, you know, everything that would happen within the service would be, you know, held by the youth. And so we had this young lady who was over our department. She probably was only like early 20s. She wasn't too much older than we were. But when it came down to time to speak, she would always be the speaker, because we would always be like, oh no, I don't want to speak. You know what I mean? So she would always be the speaker. So this one particular day, you know, she gets up and she's getting ready to speak. And the pastor is like, no, she just stopped the whole service and was like, you know, every month, like, we have the same speaker, and we got a whole, you know, whole youth department, right? And so the pastor chose me and my cousin and was like, you guys are going to speak, right? And so my cousin went first. So they gave me like 3 to 5 minutes to find the scripture, you know, really quickly. And so I found the scripture and I got up, and that was my very first speaking engagement. You know, that was my very first time speaking or preaching. And it probably was only like 5 minutes or so. But that, of course, led me to down the line becoming a minister and pastor and, you know, professional speaker as I am today, podcaster. But that was the first time, and it was just like, you're finna speak, you know what I'm saying? So it wasn't no planning or anything like that. That just kind of what happened. So in your experience, what was your first? Do you remember your first speaking or preaching opportunity? And was it planned, or was it kind of a surprise as well?
Well, like I said, like at 13, I kind of was emceeing a whole weekend, leading devotion, or having people lead devotions, leading devotions. Like, I grew up, I was the unofficial youth pastor for my church, so I was constantly speaking in front of youth, leading. I was the director of the summer day camp, so I was constantly in leadership positions. So like it was more natural for me. My first time preaching, I do remember it was at another church. The pastor gave me the opportunity to preach, and I preached on my I believe I preached on my favorite Bible verses, which is really unique, and I don't think anybody else in the world has their favorite Bible verse as mine. I can almost guarantee it. And this is why I tell you, if you can tell me that somebody else has Ephesians 1:1 and 2 as their favorite Bible verse, I'll be pleasantly surprised. Okay. Because Ephesians 1:1 and 2 is Paul, an apostle of Christ Jesus by the will of God, to the faithful who are in Ephesus, to the faithful and to the, let's see, oh man, I'm forgetting it off the top of my head. To the faithful in Ephesus, no, to the something in to the people in Ephesus, faithful who are in Christ Jesus, grace and peace to you from God our Father and Lord Jesus Christ. That middle part I'm messing up for some reason. But it's a greeting. It's Paul's greeting. Like, I don't know anybody else who would have Paul's greeting as their favorite Bible verses and life-changing Bible verses. But I could preach a whole 30-minute sermon on those two verses and why it's important to me. Won't do that here. I'll save you guys. But there's a particular reason. A whole summer day camp theme was built on those two verses.
Wow.
When I was like 20.
Yeah. So you got started early in leadership. So let's dive into that a little bit, because leadership, especially.
Sorry. real quick.
Yeah.
To the saints who are in Ephesus, the faithful who are in Christ Jesus. I knew it. It just, sorry about that.
No. It be like that sometimes. I get that too. It just you like you know it. You know what I mean? It's like it's in there somewhere. You just have to put it out. So that's cool. But I wanna talk about. So you mentioned your dad. Being in leadership, and then you started at an early age. In leadership. And going into those roles in the to serving ministry, and then eventually in your own company as well. How was stepping into leadership, and what was that like for you? Was there a level of mentorship that was needed as well, and how did you get into that too? Because I think that those of us who are in leadership positions, there are also some mentorship that comes available, and some mentorship that sometimes is necessary, or it may, like I'll say for myself, I mentor young boys, right? I'm a male mentor. And a lot of times it's like, oh, you become a male mentor because you didn't have your father in your life. And so now you want to, be this father figure to others because of what you didn't have. But in my story was no, my dad's been in my life my whole life. My mom and dad was married until my mom passed away. So it's a different reason that I do it, because sort of on the flip side of that, I want to be a father figure because I had a father figure. You know what I mean? And so in your expertise, or in your experience, especially starting so young in leadership, was there a level of mentorship that was in place at that time for you? And then how did that, even equate as you got older and really got into leadership, to mentoring, being a mentor even to some of the other people that was coming under you?
So mentorship has always been a big thing to me. And probably why it's been a big thing is because it was something that was lacking in my life.
Mm.
Like, I looked up to a ton of people, but like, I looked up to my father, and I looked up to different men in the church, but none of them mentored me. Um,
Mm.
and I always desired it, but I wasn't going to go and ask. And I think that's probably where I failed in the thing. I think I should have been more proactive, because the desire was heavily there to be mentored. Um,
Mm.
but I didn't feel it was my place to ask for it. I felt like it was a place where men should offer it. Um, and I don't know, maybe I was wrong as a kid. Maybe maybe I'm not wrong. Maybe, and that's where I think the calling needs to be, is to men, to go and offer mentorship to kids, because I think there's some desire there. Now, when I was the director of the summer day camp, we had teams who came, and I constantly talked with real youth pastors,
Mm.
and I had one in California who I actually called my mentor. I mean, I didn't get like the mentorship that I desired, where it was like a weekly meeting. Um,
Mm.
but I I had this relationship with this youth pastor in uh in California, and actually when I got married, he was the one who did the service.
Mm.
Was him, because of his impact on me. I will say that one of the last years I was at the day camp, the pastor did end up meeting weekly, but I wasn't looking at it from, like, he wasn't the one I wanted to mentor. Like, I wanted one of the elders or deacons to mentor me. And again, maybe that one probably was more on me, as I was being a little picky about who it was, and God was like,
Mm.
"Here I am sending you." I met with him weekly, and I had I think a good, but I was looking for somebody who I really was drawn to take on that role, and that never
Mm.
happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So moving forward a little bit, I definitely want us to talk about the podcast and to get into that. But before we get into that, because because this being the Deal to Heal podcast, and I definitely understand that the Common Ground, especially the Common Ground podcast, is about healing some of those things that separate us, as people and bringing us together. And that's one of the reasons why I definitely enjoyed our conversation that we had on the Common Ground podcast with your co-host, and really even our stories that we shared and our experiences with our children, and suicide ideations and all of that. And I'm not even going to tell the whole thing because you guys got to go and watch it, go and watch the episodes, and make sure you guys look it up. But I definitely enjoyed having the conversation that we had on your podcast. And so I know there were some things that you wanted to go over pertaining to healing, right? And so I'm going to kind of allow you to kind of go through, some of the things that you brought for discussion, when it comes to healing, because I believe that we all are on our healing journey. Definitely, if you listen to this podcast, you're on a healing journey of some sorts, And so that being said, there are some steps that we need to take to kind of move us along on that journey. And so I'll kind of lead into you, John, to come over and to talk about some of those tips that you brought.
Yeah. So for me, I one of the things that I've been doing a lot, and I've done it since, like, I was married for 17 years.
Mhm.
I got divorced, and I went through a journey. It was a journey of healing, and I've done a lot of reflecting, especially this year, on my healing journey.
Mhm.
And as I was reflecting and thinking about this this episode of this podcast, I came up with uh, 10 things that you need to be willing to do to achieve healing. And as I look back, these are the things that I had to be willing to do. And the first one is something that I think a lot of people skip over. And you're like, but it's healing, right? And the first one is a willing to mourn or to
Mhm.
accept loss. And
Yeah.
and people go, well, it's healing. Of course you lost something, right? But what we don't, like, in a divorce, nobody died. But
Mhm.
what we don't realize is a relationship died.
Yep.
There's still a death. There's still loss. And if there's healing that has to be done, then there is some kind of loss or some kind of death to something. It's death to maybe a philosophy. It's death to a way of living. It's a death to um, what we're used to. But it's a death, and it needs to be treated like a death, and we need to mourn that death. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to give it the the mourning that it should,
Mhm.
and to really say, okay, I did lose something out of this. Because we think of mourning and we think of loss as only in the physical sense. And so I think the first thing you got to do is be willing to accept and to mourn. The
Yeah.
second thing is, I
Well,
think you
real quick, John, I want to jump in on that one because I'm glad that you said that, because even myself, even as a grief guide and helping people along their grieving journey, that's one of the things that I love to point out is that a lot of times we only connect our grief and our mourning when someone passes, and it's like, no, you can grieve any kind of loss, any kind of major loss you can grieve, whether it's the loss of a relationship, loss of a marriage, loss of an idea, loss
a
of a
job,
job, anything that means that much to you, you can mourn that loss. And I've talked about it on this podcast and on other podcasts, that I love turtles, right? I don't know why it seems like an odd pet, but I have always loved turtles. And so when I was old enough, I bought a turtle. I actually bought two turtles, and I had my two turtles for 10 years. And they passed earlier this year. They both passed within maybe about a month of each other. you know. And so having that, always having a love for turtles, and then actually having them for 10 years, that was a major loss for me, you know. And I mourned my pets, you know what I'm saying? And so any major loss we can have grief over, and we can mourn and grieve those losses. It doesn't necessarily have to be the loss of a person or a loved one. Again, anything that you love or anything that you are really invested in that you lose, you can mourn those things, whatever that thing is. And so, like you mentioned about being divorced, I remember, going through divorce myself. I was devastated when I went through my divorce because it wasn't my example. Like I said, my mom and dad was married my whole life. You know what I'm saying? And so growing up, it was like, yeah, that's what I want. I want that, stick through the good times and bad times and all of that. And that's not what happened in my story, And so when I got to the point where we were really talking about, all right, we're about to call this thing off, I was devastated, because it was like, that wasn't my plan, like that wasn't my dream. I wanted to be married for, however long that we were supposed to be together. But again, so I grieved over that loss, the loss of the marriage, even though the marriage kind of had went bad. So it probably wasn't necessarily the grieving the loss of the marriage itself, but definitely grieving the loss of the dream that I had for my marriage. That was a big thing to me. And so I'm glad that you pointed that out. And I always like to point that out, that you can grieve and mourn any major loss. It doesn't necessarily have to be a loss of life, or the loss of the life of a loved one. All right. So back to
I
you.
think, and I think that's important too, because one of the Beatitudes is, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
Yep.
Right? And you can't get the comfort of Jesus unless you mourn. And what happens when we lose one relationship and we jump into another relationship? Instead of getting the comfort of God, we're looking for the comfort of a different person to fulfill the comfort that we should be getting from God.
Yeah.
And we're not fulfilled because we're not getting the true comfort that we desired, because we didn't mourn and we didn't bring it to him.
Yeah. And also, when we don't take that time to grieve and to mourn, and we jump right into another relationship, we're bringing all of that hurt into the new relationship. So now you're already, what I'm saying? Now and then it even get to the point where now you're putting expectations on that other person, or even taking some things out on that other person from the past relationship because you didn't heal from it. So now you're holding into standards or reflecting your emotions onto them for some things that they had nothing to do with, just because you didn't properly take out the time to mourn and to grieve that past relationship before jumping into another one.
And it's a shame with a job. It's a shame with anything else. You get hurt by one job and you bring that hurt to the next job. You don't trust, the leadership because you didn't mourn the loss of the job there.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of goes hand in hand, but the second thing is the willingness to be alone. And the willingness to be alone is a couple fold. It's to properly be comforted, you got to get rid of everybody else. You got to, especially the comfort of God. If you're looking at the comfort of God, God isn't there for show. He isn't going to show up and comfort you in the middle of everybody because you want him to put on the big show. But being alone is giving you space. And when you're grieving, when you need healing, you need space. You need to be able to do the next couple things that I'm going to talk about. But that has to happen in peace. That has to happen by yourself. Because true healing only comes from within. It doesn't come from somebody else. People will try to take you to a bar to drink your comfort away, to drink your grief away. They'll try to distract you. They're all distractions from you being alone. You know, one of the biggest things I say is I'm glad that I got divorced down in South Carolina, where I was away from my family and close friends, because it forced me to be alone. And because I was alone, I was able to deal with stuff, and I was able to rebound and start the journey of healing quicker than I would have been able to than if I had gotten divorced around my family and friends, because they would have
Mhm.
been there like, let's go out, let's go party, let's get your mind off of it, let's go, you know. So I
Yeah,
think there's a place of being alone. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
again, when God takes Israel out of Egypt, he makes them wander for 40 years. Part of it is in my belief is they had, before they could accept the promises of God, they had to grieve the loss of Egypt. And you can
Mhm.
see it because they keep on going. We were better off in Egypt. Why did you bring us out here to suffer? I'd rather be going for scraps in Egypt. Like, they were going through a mourning process, and it took them 40 years because that's they weren't dealing with their issues.
Right, right. Yeah. And I think one of the things I always tell people, especially when you're on your healing journey, you have to start with yourself because yourself is the only thing you can control, right? And so that alone time allows you the time to really sit with yourself and say, okay, what am I dealing with? Where am I hurting? What things need to be addressed? Because I always say pain is the evidence that something needs to be addressed in your life. Whatever you're hurting for something, that just letting you know something needs to be addressed. And so, yeah, I would say definitely start with yourself when it allows you that time to really sit with yourself and say, okay, what is going on with me? Why am I feeling this way? What am I hurt about? Even taking the time to say, and after you acknowledge it, to be like, okay, now what are my next steps? What do I need to do? And then that may be, finding a therapist or finding a counselor or even joining a support group, which is what I did. Bereavement support group definitely was a major blessing to me when I did that. But I had to sit with myself first. I had to acknowledge myself first, the fact that I was even hurting, and find out what was the root causes of the things that I was dealing with. So definitely, like you said, you got to spend that time alone to kind of see where you are, do that check in with yourself, and push out that outside noise. And even like you said, those family and friends who may be coming in because they love you, trying to comfort you in their way that they know how, but it may not be the comfort that you need because only you know what you're really dealing with. And so that's why you got to definitely take that time to be alone. I agree with you.
And the next two stem from being alone. The next two can't happen without being alone, and that is the willingness to be honest and the
Mm,
willingness to be accountable. And the willingness to be honest is, it can be something as if you did lose a loved one, right? The honesty may be, why did you leave me? You know, because if we're really honest, we're mad at that person for leaving us. We're mad at that person that they're not here anymore. It's
mm,
okay. Be honest. Get those feelings out. You know, if you're leaving a bad relationship, then you need to be honest with what part you played in it, what part meant something to you.
yeah.
And that's where you can't be accountable unless you're being honest. You can't sit back and be like, okay, this relationship ended, and this is why. This is my part in it, right? This is where
Mm,
I screwed up. Because whenever we're dealing with loss, we always want to blame the other person. We want to be mad at the other person. So, again, if it's a loved one, the accountability was, where did I miss opportunities to spend time with this person? Maybe that in the next person who really means something to me, I don't miss those opportunities.
mm,
Be honest, be accountable, be honest how much they meant to you. Honest in in the and accountability can be a positive thing. Like, be accountable. Like, we had great moments. That's being accountable. Accountability always isn't negative. It is positive. We can be accountable
mm,
and be happy in some of our decisions because of our accountability to ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we definitely have to, excuse me, acknowledge the emotions that we are dealing with in our time of loss as well, in our time of healing. And one of the things you just mentioned about being angry, I remember years ago when I did after my mom passed and my mother-in-law passed, I started an organization called Ann Christine Charities, which was named after my mother and my mother-in-law, and I started doing bereavement. Hosting a bereavement support group myself. And so we ended up doing this. They had a conference at our church, and we ended up doing this conference. And my session that I talked about, that I taught on for, I think it was 2 or 3 days, was bereavement and loss. And there was one lady who was there. She was an older lady, and as we began to go through talking about grief and everything, and allowing them to acknowledge how they were feeling, her thing was she was angry, and she was like, I'm angry at my husband who passed. She was like, because that wasn't the plan. Like, that wasn't the plan that we had. Like, we're supposed to be here together and raise the kids and all of this, and you left me, and now I'm here, by myself. I think they had 2 children, and they were adults though. But she was like, but you left me here with the kids, but that wasn't the plan. And so I'm angry. She was, really just expressing herself like she was angry at her husband. Of course she loved them, but it was like, no, but I'm mad because you wasn't supposed to leave me here by myself to do this alone. You're supposed to be here with me. And so I think that's important, with us, that we also acknowledge our emotion and the emotion that we're going through. And we definitely get into talking about grief and the emotional wheel and all of that, the grief wheel. There's a lot of emotions that we deal with when we're grieving, and all of them are okay. And we can feel either of them on any day. One day might be joyous, tomorrow you might be crying, the next day you might be mad, then the following day you might be dancing. It just that's just the way that it goes. But however you feel in the midst of your grief and your mourning, it's okay. And I think we have to acknowledge that. So I like when you said about being angry, because like I said, with the young lady that was a part of the thing, she had been holding that in for years, and she was like, she's very angry, with her husband who had passed away, because that wasn't the that wasn't the agreement that they made.
No. So far we have willingness to mourn, willingness to be alone, willingness to be honest, willingness to be accountable. The next two again are connected, and you need to look first inwardly at what you're dealing with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the next two are more with the thing or the person that created the loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to be willing to forgive, and a willingness to not hold on to and to release. And I say those two separately, because a lot of people will say, I forgive but I don't forget. You need to forgive
Mm-hmm.
and to forget. um I'm a big proponent on that. But forgive, and again, this could be good or bad. Like, what, you left me. That wasn't the plan. I forgive you for leaving me. I forgive you for leaving me. I know you didn't want to leave me. I'm not going to hold on to the fact that you didn't live up to your end of the promise, right? Now, for a bad relationship, you may not be on speaking terms, but guess what? I forgive you. I'm not going to hold on to the stuff. Forgiveness and holding on only affects you.
Yep.
The other person, that is living inside your head. Like, we think that not forgiving somebody, not and holding on to some kind of grudge is affecting the other person. It's not. They don't even know what's going on in your head. They don't know that they have this, that they're living rent free in your head. Like, you're giving them rent free space of your time, emotions, and everything else. It's not because I'm not telling you to forget because they deserve for you to forget. I'm telling you to forget because you deserve for you to forget, because that's wasted space that doesn't need to be taken up in your stuff. So, and again, it could be good, it can be bad. You can be the person who goes, that wasn't the plan. Listen, but I forgive you. I love you. I know you didn't want to leave me. I'm not going to hold on to the fact that, because there are some people who will live in that thing. They
Mm-hmm.
told me that they were going to leave me. They promised that they would spend the rest of their life with me, and now they've left me. And they're angry at the person that they loved for 20 something plus years. I don't
Mm-hmm.
get it. Um, but you need to be that willingness to forgive and to forget, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that the forgiveness is really big, and I'll talk a little bit about one of the organizations that I'm a part of called the Forgiveness Mission, and we do these virtual workshops, these free virtual workshops all about forgiveness, and we've been doing it for like 4 or 5 years now. These workshops, and yeah, forgiveness is so much at the top of the list when it comes to, especially doing your healing. You have to be able to forgive. And my part on the workshops that we hold is actually forgiveness of self. And I talk about ways to help you to forgive yourself, because it's one thing to hold grudges against someone else and not forgive someone else, but then when you hold those same ideas and those same grudges against yourself, or even some of your past mistakes, for some of the things you may have said even to yourself that you didn't follow through on, that can be a whole nother thing. And so definitely forgiveness is at the top of that list, whether you're forgiving others or forgiving yourself for some of the things that you may have done that you're angry at yourself for. And you'd be like, man, I'm upset with myself because I should have known better. I should have done better. Maybe I should have, treated this person better before they passed away, and all of those different things that you hold against yourself. But sometimes that forgiveness, you definitely have to extend it to other people, but also sometimes you have to extend that forgiveness to yourself as well.
Yeah. And so the next one, to keep this going, because I know I don't want to make this a super long podcast, but the willingness to improve and not
Mhm.
stay where you're at, because too many times we want to stay where we're at, and it you got to give your willing. And once you are honest, once you hold yourself accountable, once you forgive, once you forget, you got to give yourself permission, the willingness to improve, to be better, to go on with your life, you know. And the next three are in reflection on how you do that. Um, a willingness to be an example, and I'm going to give you a little example of what I mean by that. Um, my daughters came up to visit, and I intentionally wanted to have a conversation with them. And this was at around 4th of July. And I wanted to have a conversation because one of the things I realized over the last year is, and I think it was helped through the podcast that made me realize this, is
Mhm.
that my, what I would like, I was always holding stuff against my ex. I always blamed my ex for stuff. And I blamed my ex for how my kids turned out. And one day I realized, like, dude, I had a part to play in it. And I started looking at the part that I played in it. And so they came up to visit. I'm like, I want to have a conversation with you. I'm like, I own up to, I see this action in you. And I know this action was caused by my action
Mhm.
or my lack of action. And I want to apologize because I think that part of why you're dealing with this is because of the part that I played in it. And I always blamed her mother for the one thing that she dealt with. And I'm not going to get into specifics, but
Mhm.
I realized that even though that may be true, I had a part to play in it. And that part I had to own up. And I wanted to invest in my daughters to show them what healthy healing looked like, and not just continual. If I want them to break those curses, because that becomes a generational curse on her, is what me and her mom did in our fighting and everything else that affected her to feel, to feel a certain way, that I needed to own up to it. I needed to own up to it, that plays into that, so that she knows how to healthful, healthy, to be more healthy in her relationships going forward, and how to improve in her personal thing. So I wanted to take what I learned and pour it back into her. So I wanted to be the example of this is how you heal. And I had it with both my daughters, and I went to the other daughter, said this thing that you're dealing with, again, I can see why, I can see how this action causes you to do this. And this is something that you learn because of this. And I'm sorry for it. And, this isn't healthy on how you're handling it. But I want to show you that I've realized that my part in the play with it. And I want to ask for your forgiveness on that. And I want you to know that that's not your reaction to what perceived isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
I love you girls. I everything about and so be the once you start to come through the healing and that willingness to improve, now you can pour into other people. You can be that example. And I'll finish. Willingness to help others, which is kind of related. You see somebody going through something that's like-minded. You went through it. Now help somebody else. Point out some things that you learned. Don't tell them this is what you're doing wrong. You say, let me show you what I did and what I went through, and give them an example, give them a point of reference. And finally, the final thing is the willingness to celebrate. We're never going to be completely healed. Trauma is trauma for life. Loss is loss for life. You're never going to be 100% fully healed until the day you die.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't start celebrating. It doesn't mean that you have to stay in that mourning period. You have to stay in that loss period. At the end, you need to be willing to celebrate who you are, where you've come from, what you've accomplished, and celebrate the new you.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And definitely with that new you, one of the things that I teach when I actually, it's right in alignment with that, which is the new normal. Your new normal, like after you have accepted that these are the changes that you've been through, and that's what's, this is what your life looks like now, to be able to accept that this is my new normal now, and being able to find the love and joy that still remains in your life, even after a major loss. Those things are still in your life. You just have to take the time to actually look back and find them, because sometimes we're hurting so much and we're dealing with so much that we forget that there's other parts of your life that still has joy, and so I definitely agree with you on that. And then one other thing you said about, we're never going to be whole the way that we were. We're never going to be 100%. And I would say once you start experiencing grief is the hamster wheel of life. Like once you get on that grief hamster wheel, you never get off. It becomes easier for you to deal with some things to become more comfortable with, and so you're not triggered as much. But once you have experienced a heavy loss that you grieve, you're never 100%, because you still, once you have experienced that loss remains with you. How you respond to it will change over time. It may not cause as so much pain, and then it may get to the point where now, even after the pain, you only remember the good things. You only remember the things that make you happy that came out of that loss. But you'll never be the same as you were. And so I definitely agree with you. I love that list. I love that we talked about so many things. Before we get out of here, John, I wanted to talk about the podcast, which again, I had the opportunity to be on. So what was kind of the premise of the podcast that made you start it? And what is it when the listeners come on and they listen to the podcast, what is the main messaging that you want them to walk away with?
Again, it goes back to the creation of the Common Ground Project USA. It's about bringing back humanity. It's about healing humanity in essence. Finding unity, being able to look at everybody and says, you know what? None of us are perfect. None of us are. Plus, you know what? I don't want everybody to be me. You know, life would be boring if all there was in this world was Philly. You know, I'd get bored of myself. You know, I like the fact that there's an Earnest James. I like the fact that there's a Sydney Nicole. I love the fact that who is my co-host, but that there's other people who have different opinions, who have different ways of seeing stuff. The reason why mentorship is important is because that's a different person who sees things differently than I do, because they have a different perspective on what life is. They're usually an older person who's pouring into somebody, maybe somebody who's gone through healing and now is mentoring somebody else through grief. You know, life would be boring if we were all the same. Mm-hmm. So let's not lose the beauty of that. Let's embrace the beauty of that. Let's sit down and learn new people, learn new things. We can sit down and the one real beauty is that I love when I don't see eye to eye with a guest, because we'll sit down at the end of our podcast and we'll tell them what we took away from that conversation. And so everybody has value. You can take something away from every conversation you have if you're intentional about it. Too many times we are just flippant with everybody. We become this, I choose sides. I don't know people. What side are you on? Like that's all I care about is what side you're on. Mm-hmm. Dude, no, it's not what side you're on. It's about who is Earnest James. You know, who is Philly? Who is you? And you are good. You know, God said it is good when he created man and female, male and female. You are wonderful. You are awesome. Listen, I don't need to agree with everything that you have to say, but I will sit down with almost anybody and have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I definitely enjoyed my opportunity that I had to be on the podcast. Again, you know, to my listeners, make sure you guys go and check out that episode on the Common Ground podcast. And I'm sure you can find it easily on YouTube.
It's the Common Ground Project USA on YouTube, the Common Ground podcast on Spotify and Apple.
That's it. And we'll definitely have the links in the description so you guys can make it easy for you guys to find it. Make sure you like my episode. It was great.
Yes, definitely. Like, comment, share, do everything. Likes go a long way. Make sure, and they don't cost anything to like. Hit that like button right now. Stop what you're doing. Hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a cent. It helps my brother out. So
that's right. And it helps me. And I think we did a collaboration link. So whether you guys watching this on my if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, then go down and you'll be able to see the collaboration that we did for our episode, and you'll be able to watch it as well. And make sure you like it and all of those same things so that, you know, help my people out too. Philly, I want to say thank you, man, for coming on. Thank you for being on. I want you to have the last word. I want you to leave us with a word of advice, motivation, however you feel, and also your social media handles where we can find you and to follow you. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that. We're going to hear a word from our sponsor, and then I'll come back and say a couple words, and then we'll turn it over to Philly. So hold on. Hey, guys. This podcast is sponsored by the Deal to Heal School for Living. That is our online community on the school platform. You guys can go there and check it out absolutely free for the first 7 days. And while you're there, take advantage of all the free resources that we have. And if you decide to stay, it's only $27 a month. And each month you have access to a new workshop. So go check that out at the Deal to Heal School for Living on the school platform. Just scan the QR code in the corner and you guys will be able to get there. All right. We'll see you soon. All right. Make sure you guys check that out. and make sure that you guys check out our website, which I'm going to put up right now. Make sure you guys also check us out on our website. The deal, not duh, is dealhealfulfill.org. Again, that's dealhealfulfill.org. Check out our website to have more information on some of the things that we do and everything that we have. So make sure you guys are checking us out. Ebooks by E. James was the ebook website that I had my ebooks under. I actually changed it, so they're not on Ebooks by E. James anymore. But I will have the links down below where you guys can still get access to the ebooks. And also, if you want to get the ebooks absolutely free, go to the Deal to Heal School for Living. Again, that's on the school platform. The first 7 days are absolutely free. While you're there for your free time, you can go to the resource tab and download all our ebooks absolutely free. So make sure you guys go and check that out. Also, deal2healtees.com. That's deal, the number 2, healtees.com. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. That is our tagline. So make sure you guys go and check out our inspirational t-shirt line, which includes our podcast merch, which is our t-shirts with our podcast logos on it. There's one for the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, as well as one for the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where you can order them there, or again, order some of our other inspirational t-shirts that we have there. Again, that's deal, the number 2, healtees.com, deal2healtees.com. Make sure you are checking it. Make sure you guys check that out. Last but not least, I talked about it a little bit earlier. Over the last couple of years, I've been blessed to be a part of an organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And what we do, we have free virtual workshops bi-monthly talking about the area of forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, forgiveness of the world, even forgiveness and wellness by focusing on how unforgiveness affects us physically. These workshops, again, are bi-monthly. They're absolutely free, but the information is priceless. So you guys can go to forgivenessmission.com in order to sign up for the next free virtual workshop. Whenever you listen to this, either one just passed or one is coming up. So again, go to forgivenessmission.com to sign up for our next free virtual workshop. Philly, once again, I want to say thank you so very much for being on, for sharing your story and your expertise, definitely for those tips on how to help us to heal in our lives. I want you to have the last word, and so the floor is yours.
So my last word is that be intentional. Be intentional and be curious, but be intentional about everything you do. Be intentional about your healing. Be intentional about your day. Be intentional about the people you're spending life in. There's a saying that I used to say growing up: if you aim at nothing, you're sure to hit it all the time. If you're not intentional, you're being intentionally not intentional. And that has the same repercussions that being intentional does. So choose to be intentional positively instead of allowing life to dictate your intentions. You can catch me everywhere at the Common Ground Project USA. We're a Facebook page, we're a LinkedIn page. On Instagram, it's Philly Go Live. This again, it's the commongroundproject.com, the Common Ground Project USA.com, Common Ground Project USA everywhere. YouTube is the Common Ground Project USA, and Spotify and Apple is the Common Ground Podcast. Again, it's been an absolute pleasure. When you take the time to hear somebody's story, it gives you the opportunity to find common ground. So that's my saying, and I'll stick to it.
No doubt, no doubt. We can't end it no better than that. To my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Until next time, you guys be blessed. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.